Hey everyone, welcome back to the You're Not Finished podcast. My name is Brittany Franklin, and I'm the host of this podcast, who is very excited to bring you another episode with a special guest who is sharing his survivor story. But before we get to that, just a couple of announcements. First of all, there are new blogs on the You're Not Finished website. So if you are interested in reading those, head over to www.yournotfinished.com. Feel free to comment on those. Feel free to share your own experiences based on what is being talked about there. And if you would like to be a guest blogger on the site, feel free to reach out via email to brittany@yournotfinished.com. Additionally, I have recently released a new workbook called You're Not Finished, The Journey from False Intimacy to Freedom. And I'll share more about that on another podcast episode. But for now, it is a workbook for women and girls who desire to be free of pornography use and self-stimulation. For those who use it as a coping mechanism, I believe it's an excellent tool to couple with therapy, with counseling, with other forms of support and healing. And so make sure you check that out. That is exclusively on Amazon. Again, the title is You're Not Finished, The Journey from False Intimacy to Freedom. If you want to learn more about what is in the workbook, make sure you head over to yournotfinished.com to learn more. Now, those of you who have been following You're Not Finished for some time know that I am always excited to give people the opportunity to share their stories on the podcast or on the site. And today we have an inspirational survivor who is passionate about mental health and suicide prevention, excellent at educating and empowering others on their journey towards healing. He has conducted countless presentations and workshops in the nation and around the world, and he is just a beautiful voice that is sharing his journey from mental hellness to mental wellness. Please enjoy my interview with David Woods Bartley. All right, so again, no intro. We're just gonna jump into like some questions and stuff like that, and then I'll worry about the intro and all of that stuff later.
Okay. I'm in your hands.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Happily.
Thank you very, very much for being a guest on You're Not Finished. Like, I'm honored. I'm glad that you even found You're Not Finished. I thought You're Not Finished was pretty hard to find. So the fact that you were able to find it and that you reached out and wanted to share your story is just, it makes me happy, because I'm always looking for stories to share with other people, to kind of encourage people to know that they're not alone, but also, you know, so that they can be empowered to eventually, when they're comfortable and when they're ready, share their stories as well. So I want to know, just to start off with, like, what is your connection to mental health, mental illness, suicide prevention, and why is it so important to you?
It really comes, Brittany, from, you know, that classic term, lived experience. So on August 31st, 2011, I tried to end my life. I tried to kill myself. I like to be just very bold and just say that's what it is. And thankfully, I was saved. And in these last 13 years, it has been this journey, as I like to call it, from mental hellness to mental wellness. And so, but if I look back from a more historical standpoint, in terms of, well, dude, like, how did you get to that point? You know, what did you just wake up on August 31st, 2011 and decide to kill yourself? I say, no. And that's one of the things, you know, that I talk about a lot, is that suicide is almost never spontaneous.
Absolutely.
It is so incredibly rare. And I had, you know, I was 48 years old at the time. I'd probably, by that point in my life, thought about killing myself, I don't know, 10,000 times. I don't know what the number was. So, born January 12th, 1963. I'm a winter baby in Chicago. And the youngest of four boys. I have three incredible brothers who are 6, 9, and 11 years older than I, so I'm the baby.
Okay.
Migrated to Washington, D.C., that area. That's where I grew up, and I was just 3 years old. And our beloved father, James Hamilton Bartley, everybody knew him as Ham, died when Brittany, unfortunately, he was just 41 years old. And I mention that because while he died of cancer, because unfortunately he made the poor choice of smoking, what I am told, and I have some memory, not much, that he was incapacitated by clinical depression, just
Wow.
wiped, just like obliterated by it. And his
Hmm.
father, my paternal grandfather, had killed himself. So I obviously then there is a genetic influence that I was born with. And cruising through then life, I was 12 years old, and that was a pivotal time with an unfortunate experience that I was, as a new member of a Boy Scout troop, was on multiple occasions sodomized and raped and violated and
Hmm.
all those terrible, terrible things. And forgive my bluntness, but it's what happens. And every time this monster did these things to me, he told me, I'll never forget. He said, David, now don't forget, these are initiations and all the boys go through it, but we never talk
Wow.
about it. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but when I know that the genesis, the beginning of my experience of both with depression and suicidal ideation, I was 12 years old. That's when the whole thing came together.
Yeah.
And then culminated when I was 48 at that particular time when it's if you talk to most people, we and I include myself in that brother and sisterhood, we're convinced of these horrific lies. And in the words of the famous great chef David Chang, who's battles his own fight with bipolar, the chef says, when you're depressed, you're convinced that everything you think is true. And I'm like, oh, chef, that's so
That's so
right.
accurate.
Bless you,
Yeah,
dear
that's
soul.
really accurate.
So, what I, like many in that situation, believed on that day 13 years ago was I was worthless and useless and stupid and pitiful and grotesque, ugly, and equally terrible was my belief that my then amazing former wife, Deanna, and my three brothers and everybody else, they'd be much better off if I would just go, just get out of the way, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like the world would be so much better off without you. And that's how I found myself standing on what I like to say on a dark spot on a very tall bridge. And Dee and I were living a couple hours west of San Francisco. So I wasn't on the Golden Gate Bridge. I was on the Forest Hill Bridge. And the interesting distinction is that the Forest Hill Bridge at 730 feet tall is 500 feet further off the ground than its more famous cousin. It's actually the fourth
Wow.
tallest bridge in the United States. But I was pressed up against the barrier, and somebody saw it, some soul, and called 911, and some extraordinary first responder created connection with
Mm.
me. This amazing experience through a series of extraordinary questions that you would never think to ask. And ultimately, I was taken off the bridge to an emergency room and then 15 days in a psych ward. And that began my journey from hellness to where I am today, still fighting it. I'll tell you, I had an interesting experience at the end of last year that we can talk about because I'm here to share everything.
Yeah. And I appreciate your honesty and directness about suicide and mental health and mental distress and mental illness because there are a lot of ways in which people kind of sugarcoat it that I think sometimes add to the stigma that make it,
Mm,
you know what I mean, not easy for people to talk about. And so I'm glad that you're being direct because, and I'm glad that you don't feel any like shame or guilt in sharing your experience because, you know, people need to hear that nitty gritty and that the hard things, you know what I mean? Because that's the hellness that they're going through, right? And
yeah.
so I appreciate doing that. If it's okay, can we go back to your experience of being sexually assaulted? Can we go
Yes.
back to that? because
Absolutely.
I want to, it is still men's mental health month. And so I know a lot of times people don't speak about their experiences as a male being sexually assaulted, whether that's as an adult or as a child. Can you expound upon how that shaped your mind and how you are healing, maybe still, or how you have
Sure.
healed from that
Yeah,
experience?
I think, and just to put it into context, so I was raised in the 70s, and I'm a compliant person as it is,
Mm,
so I'm pretty much a rule follower. I mean,
mm,
almost always.
mm,
So when and I had obviously been groomed by this person, identified as somebody who was new. Somebody asked me a question the other day, and I never thought about this. Did the monster know that that I was the child of a single parent? And I'm like, wow, God, I don't know. That's that's such an amazingly great question. And I mean, again, it just had me think about like how terrible some people are because he probably did know that.
right.
So growing up, and it's interesting because I literally just had this conversation, a part of this conversation with my beloved, my fiance today. I I hate my body.
Mm,
I do. I mean, I do. I have tried for. I mean, I'm 61 years old. I've tried for a lot of years to overcome that, and I make sure. I mean, I like when I'm in the bathroom. I mean, it is as dark as I can possibly make it.
wow.
It's just it's that yeah. And so my beloved was talking to me today, and we're talking about hugging and I said, I still even after all these years, I still struggle with that. You know, so and I've lived with it for 50 years.
Hmm.
Man, it's really hard. I just it's so yeah, and I've spent a lot of time in therapy. I've had some incredible therapists, amazing people who continue to work with me, and it's still Brittany. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever heal that part, to be honest. Um,
Right.
and thankfully, just to continue, just to expand the conversation, I didn't, and thank God, it. What happened to me, I never felt the desire to do that to somebody else,
Yeah.
which I know. So thank God,
Yeah.
that's because so that part, I guess, was a healing because it's never come up. Um, but what remains and has been is just this terrible, terrible, terrible hatred of my body.
That is, first of all, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. Because I know from experience, it's difficult. And I know that, yeah, I identified, very closely with, hating your body. Like just to briefly like share, like I cover myself all the time. Like
Mm,
I don't want to give, yeah, and I don't want to give anybody a reason to, look. And it shouldn't be like that, right? Because other people should be able to control, whatever evil, whatever urges, whatever things that they have going on within themselves, right? But I was molested from the ages of 7 to 9, and
oof,
then I was raped at the age of 13.
I'm so
So
sorry.
Yeah. And so I completely identify with everything that you're sharing and about you hating your body. Like that's not a trigger for me, but it's like, oh, I identify with that so much. And I didn't understand it as me hating my body. It was more so as like a coping mechanism or a protective measure so that I wouldn't be objectified.
Mm,
Right.
mm,
And so I really appreciate you sharing that because I know that someone who's listening, that'll unlock something for them probably, and they'll be able to, bring that to a therapist, bring that to a friend, maybe start their healing journey as someone who has unfortunately has the experience of being sexually abused and assaulted. So
yeah.
thank you for that. And I do apologize for everything that you have experienced. I know I'm not sure if that means anything coming from me, but
Oh, I
I
mean,
just
that means the world to me.
I appreciate you sharing.
And which I will add, and you said something that it's not like I forgot it, but you just reminded me. I act in a similar way in that I am literally almost never naked. Like
Same.
literally. I mean,
Hmm.
shower, that's really it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is just like it's yeah. Don't no. I don't want to take my shirt off. I don't want to do none of that. No,
Yep.
I want to be closed all the time.
Completely understandable.
No, so thank you for so to what you just said. It, it's already you sharing yours is healing for me. So thank you.
Yeah. I
I've never
appreciate
heard
that.
anybody say that.
I I hope that because I think a lot of people unfortunately have the experience, whether they're aware of it or not, of being, sexually mishandled in ways. I mean, we're from what I'm noticing about just I guess Americans maybe in general or just the culture in general that there's a high emphasis on sexuality and a
Mm,
lot of people don't really know what to do with that. You know what I mean? They don't
mm,
know how to teach it to their children, like how to handle maybe sexual urges, how to talk about, their body parts and things like that as they're growing up. And so I believe that a lot of people unfortunately have this experience. And it would be good for, people like us to continue to heal and share our stories and have other people not be afraid of talking about maybe how that can be a route to other sexual behaviors or how that could be a route to other coping mechanisms and how that can be a route of maybe not fully maturing and growing up in certain areas, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, there's a lot
I
of, yeah, go
no
ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
no 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 no. I over talked on you. I'm sorry. I just two things. Yeah, I I agree. And then so in all the talks and stuff that I do, which is what I do,
Hmm.
is I'm a freak about quotes. I love quotes, just
Hmm.
love it. And so every day I get this thing. It's called From Grateful Living. So this is, and I got this yesterday. I love the serendipity, Brittany, because it's I've never heard this before, and it speaks to exactly what you have just done for me. It says to know someone's pain is to share in it, and to share in it is to relieve some of it.
Mm, very true.
That's so yeah, I've never heard anybody say that they want to be covered up all the time. And just knowing there's at least one other beautiful soul in the world that shares that same tendency, whatever we want to call it. Thank you.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
likewise. Yeah. I mean, like I said, that unlocked something for me that I know will be beneficial to my own personal healing as well. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. I want to talk about mental hellness to mental wellness. Am I saying that
No,
correctly?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's yeah.
That's not a phrase that I've ever heard before, but I feel like it perfectly describes like the process of trying to heal.
Yeah. Well,
So,
thank you. Thank you.
can you expound upon where that actually came from and how it is, you know, how it's kind of foundational to who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm gonna give credit to the universe because it's so great. I mean, every time I share it and I'm blessed, like when I'm in the presence of an amazing soul like you, and you reflect back and talk about like, oh wow, that's really, really great. Did not come from me.
Hmm.
Maybe it came through me, but it
Hmm.
didn't come from me because it is just it's amazingly
Yeah.
perfect. So if I think about, the hellness part and what I try to do at the beginning of my talks, I break my talks up. So I usually talk for about an hour. And my base talk when I go with the military or to schools or to churches or to businesses everywhere, it's called the why of suicide and the how of hope.
Mm.
Just these two things, because those are really the two opposites,
Right.
right? Because when you're in suicide, you are the total absence of hope. And when you're in hope, you're not going to kill yourself. So
Correct.
those
Yep.
are the two ends. So in the beginning of the talk is all about the hell part. So I talk about genetics, talk about rape, and then talk about acute self-hatred. And it's really so another quote, Maya Angelou, who's just phenomenal. This beautiful soul says, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. Equal to that is another quote that says, to not have your suffering recognized is an almost unspeakable form of violence. So I
Mm.
put those two things together. So I'm walking around for all those years with all of this untold story, all of this accumulated suffering. So I like to distinguish, it's not about being sad. When
Mm.
people think about, depression, that's really bad. I know what it's like to be depressed. Like, well, I don't know if you do. And you know who gave me the words to be able to distinguish the difference between sadness and depression, Brittany? A second grader.
Mm.
So I was working with this second grade class, and second in to about fourth grade, my talks are a little bit different. They're not quite as intense, but I get into fifth and sixth, it's pretty much they get the talk that adults do. So because they can handle it.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to the second grader and I ask them this question. I say, hey, do you think there's a difference between sadness and depression? And the kids look at me like I'm an idiot. Of course there is. Like, okay. So I say, well, who wants to tell me what's the difference? And a little boy raises his hand like immediately, like, all right, brother, lay it on me. He says, yeah, when you're sad, you know why. But when you're depressed, you don't. Like,
Wow.
oh my God.
That's spot on.
I'm
Wow.
like, oh my God. Oh, dear soul. That's just so great. Yes, yes, yes. That's it. And then you couple that with Chef Chang. When
Mm.
you begin to believe that everything you think is true. So you just then,
Yeah.
and it's not. You're so burdened with the pain that is not just. It has a physicality to it. Depression has a physical pain to it. It's like a muscular injury.
Hmm.
There is you hurt physically,
Yeah.
but then you've lost your normal wide vision becomes like the circumference of a paper towel roll in terms of you're only
Mm.
seeing a small fraction of the reality of what's going on.
Right.
And then you lose the ability to imagine anything beyond what you're feeling, keyword, what you're feeling in that moment. You become convinced that everything you think is true. You don't know why. There's no
Yeah.
reason. And for when I was in the psych ward, which by the way, incredible experience. Like God loved those beautiful souls who worked in the psych ward. God love my roommate, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember Daniel from 13 years ago. Just, it was like, we were like brothers,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I'm like, and I remember thinking like, this doesn't seem like, you know, when I think about a psych ward, this was not what I had expected it to be. Like, this is like an okay place, really. It's all right. So, and when people found out where I was and why, they couldn't understand it
Mm-hmm.
because I was married to this amazing soul who's still one of my best friends, incredible person. And we ran an animal sanctuary. Oh, and it was huge. We had 100 animals at any one time. We had 25 horses. We had 23 dogs, all of whom lived in the house. We had 9 potbelly pigs. We had goats and sheep and ducks and geese and bunnies and birds and turtles and fish. We had this whole thing. And because of the mama bear, you know, heart of my former wife, we took the ones nobody wanted.
Mm.
Most all of them were dying, or they had special needs, or they had literally been tossed away. And so they stayed until they made, as we like to say, their transition. And on June 2nd, 2010, we were the half-page cover story in the life section of USA Today.
Wow.
14 months later, Brittany, there I am on a dark spot on a tall, tall bridge about to kill myself.
Mm.
That's how this thing is hiding all amongst us. It is everywhere. There's no space in our societal makeup in which suicide is not inching its way and expanding its reach into.
Wow.
So that's the reality of the situation. But then I pose some, I don't like to use the word solutions. I like to use the word response.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, okay, well, how do we respond to the crisis? Okay. There's responses. They're really good and they're really easy and they're really effective.
Right.
We just got to realize, I think a lot of it is, you know, my job. What I like to say is I like to make suicide prevention doable. I just want to make it doable, you know, because I think sometimes people think, well, I don't have initials past my name, or you can never change anybody's mind, or like, actually, you've actually saved people's life. You just don't know it.
Right.
And I base what I teach based on the quotation of this extraordinary psychiatrist who is an amazing man. He's on the very close to the top of people that I hope one day the universe gives me the honor to meet. Dr. Drew Ramsey. Dr. Ramsey is a psychiatrist, a pioneering psychiatrist. He's also a professor at Columbia. He's an author. He's very much into brain gut health. He's a farmer. He does a lot of work around suicide. And check out what he says. And this is what I base my responses on. So here's what he says. Someone you see today is thinking about killing themselves. Your smile, your question, your love could save them. Trust me, they told me it did.
Wow. That's
And I'm like,
beautiful.
it just like, so, and I just, every time I say that quote, I imagine a patient sitting in front of Dr. Ramsey saying, I'm here. I'm here because somebody smiled at me.
Yeah. Because
I'm
of someone's
here.
kindness.
I'm here because somebody asked me how I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here because I went to the mailbox and there was a note that I didn't expect. That's why I'm here. And I'm like, I'm going to tell people we can do that.
Yeah. That's good.
We can do these things. It's not like they work. They do. Just make it a habit. That's all. That's all. So mine are just some variation of those same things. It's just a little bit different.
I think that's beautiful. Like, because you genuinely do not know what people are going through.
Mm-mm.
There's a lot of things that people can hide behind. You can hide your depression, your sadness, your anxiety behind your career, behind your family, behind
Mm.
a lot of accolades or things that people find important. You can hide it behind your sexuality and your sexual behaviors. You can hide it behind, you know, artistry if you're a singer songwriter, you know what I mean? Or you can express it in that way and make it look beautiful, but still not have the ability or the capacity to be able to heal. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? And
Yep.
so we have the ability to be the reason why someone continues living, but why someone has hope, why someone sees like, hey, you know what, maybe I shouldn't give up today. Maybe there's something out there for me. You know what I mean? We don't have to have the psychological jargon together and stuff like that. This is why You're Not Finished exists for me, because even though I have the psychology degree and I could pursue the master's, I'm like, I do not want to be anybody's therapist, because like I feel like I would get too like, oh, like I'm so sorry. Like I would be crying right there with them, you know what I'm saying? And so like
Yes.
that would not be helpful to anybody. But what I can do with You're Not Finished is I can give people the ability to share their stories. I can share my story. I can be kind. I can do giveaways. I can do what is tangible for me, just like you have done what is tangible for you within your power to do. And so I think that's amazing that you remind people to acknowledge what it is they can do for their sphere of influence, is what I really pretty much hear you saying. You know what I mean? Because we're there's so many people in the world. We can't save the world. You know what I mean? We can't impact the
Right.
entire world as much as we want to, but what we can do is start with our family, start with the people who are close to us, start by seeing things maybe a little bit differently, start by slowing down and actually listening to what people are saying. You know what I mean? Start by acknowledging our own hurts and hangups and habits, you know, things that we might not be dealing with, and putting ourselves in the position where we meet people who give us the same hope that we have the ability to give to others. So I really appreciate the message that you're sharing through, you know, your presentations, through your workshops, through everything that you are doing. I mean, you're putting your life on the line essentially for other people to live. You know what I mean?
No, no. Well, thank you. That's incredibly kind of you to say. I
So
just,
it's beautiful. You know what I mean? I mean, you're giving a lot of yourself, like despite the things that you are experiencing and still healing from, like you are allowing yourself to be a beacon of hope and light. You know what I mean? And so I just pray, and you know, I'm glad that we're friends now, right? And so like I can obviously
amen.
be a source of, you know, encouragement for you, and I just pray that you continue to put yourself in positions where you can receive that same hope that you're giving. I really appreciate it.
No, that means the world to me, Brittany. It does. And I will tell you that I am who I am and where I am because of the people in my life. You know, starting with my beloved fiance, Deanna and I, my former wife and I never had kids. My beloved has children, so now I have three children in my life who know my condition. They know what I do. They are incredibly supportive. My three brothers. I have more than one psychiatrist because I have more than one therapeutic approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an incredible. The people in my life are. I am beyond blessed. I wouldn't be here
Right.
without them and all those. And it's to your point, the small things that they do. Like every morning, I wake up and on my phone is a text. And it's not just a text; it's a message from my eldest brother, who's 11 years older, who has always been more like my father than my brother
Mm-hmm.
because we lost again father when I was so young. I
Mm-hmm.
start my day every day with a message from really my dad,
Hmm.
and it's incredible.
I love that.
it's amazing. So I think, what Dr. Ramsey talks about, and in my talks and workshops, my methods are, I encourage people become great at remembering people's names.
Mm,
Leverage curiosity to create understanding, because what we see is almost never what is. And make a promise to never again, for the rest of your life, ask a why question, because why questions tend to make everybody defensive. So it's not why did you do that, it's what inspired you to do that.
yeah,
It
that's good.
And then ultimately, expression, let people know how you feel, and lots of different ways, text and handwritten notes. And I'll tell you quickly, so until 3 years ago, August 31st of every year was the worst day of the year for me,
Hmm.
because it's just like it's the anniversary. And so I go out to my mailbox, and there's this envelope, and it's handwritten, my name, but there's no return address. And I'm in a pissy, angry, upset mood just to begin with. And open up, and it's this card, and it's a picture of a glacier, and it says advice from a glacier.
Mm.
Like, carve your own path, go slow, channel their strengths, whatever. Like, I'm just like,
Mm.
I'm not in the mood. And I'm gonna throw the
Mm.
card away because I don't care. Like, how dare you? And I said, well, let me just go ahead and open it up. And I open it up, Brittany. And on the inside, it says, happy today.
Mm.
Written by an incredible friend of mine who I met in a depression support group years ago, who knew that August 31st was going to be hard.
Yeah.
So he knew that. Hey, just a note to remind you that you are an extraordinary person with so much to give so many others. You are a tremendous source of healing just by your personal presence.
Mm-hmm.
This is not only my sentiment. So many others also believe in you. Believe in yourself. Reject the lies. I love you.
I love that.
And you know what August 31st is for me now? New Year's Day.
Love that. I love that.
It's
Dang.
simple things that we can do. And I can tell you, I got other notes. Something that a lieutenant colonel gave me that, if we have time, is mind blowing in terms of, yeah,
Yeah.
just those sort of expressions.
Yes.
It's just
Hmm.
recognition, understanding, and expression. Your smile, your question, your love could save them.
To
Trust
speak
me,
to
it
the
can make
points
you.
that you just made, which were incredibly beautiful. I love that. The tagline for You're Not Finished is using stories of survival to save lives, right?
Oh, wow.
And so that's why I'm like, it's insane that you're saying it's not that insane, right? I mean, I feel like everything happens for a very specific reason. So it's not that crazy that we're meeting, that you're talking about sharing your stories, that you're mentioning, people who understand that everyone has and potentially is a story that is used to bring life to others in their darkest times. They
Right.
have the ability to do it. And I feel like people essentially are created to do that, right? I mean, my belief as a Christian is, one of the foundational beliefs for Christianity is to love God, but also love your neighbor as yourself. And you have to love yourself, right, in order to be able to love your neighbor well. And so I think that that's essentially what you're describing: loving, neighborly love in the form of little small things that you can do that have a really large impact, essentially, right?
1,000%. And yes, and I think it's there are more sophisticated, complicated
Hmm.
bigger to a certain degree, aspects, avenues, ways, methodologies of suicide prevention, which
Yes.
is great. That's fine.
Yeah, we need that.
That's just not my lane. No,
Correct.
because I don't. It because and it goes back exactly, Brittany, to exactly what you were sharing at the beginning of this incredible experience with you. It's the, these methods are I gain as much as I hope the receiver does.
Hmm.
So for me, in what I share, in when I remember somebody's name, I feel good about that.
Yeah.
When I ask a question to allow somebody to tell their story, I feel good about that. When I sit down and put pen to paper to express to somebody how I feel or what, whatever the sentiment is, I feel good about that. So it makes sense to me why these methods, it's not about me. It's just kind of like hellness to wellness. These methods came from the universe. It's
Yeah.
just, all I am is a practitioner,
Hmm.
and I'm a good practitioner of it. It is.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. And it's funny, I was talking with my beloved, someone to speak at a conference next week or sometime soon. And it's a safety conference, it's the campus safety conference in Atlanta. And so the people who are there they're like police officers and, everybody who's involved in keeping students safe. And I thought, oh, you know what? I got to maybe change what I'm going to talk about in terms of, responses. But then I'm like, actually, like if a superintendent at a school remembers the name of a student and unbeknownst to the superintendent that student is suffering from depression, the fact that the superintendent remembers the name, that can make all the difference in the world. I'm like,
Yep.
no, you know what? These don't, I was thinking that I had to complicate my methods. And I'm like, I don't, I don't. I
Right.
got to tell you, if I can, there's a couple of really good stories that are.
For sure.
So the one, this is, I love this one. So, what we see almost never is there's always a story.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about condoning or judging behavior. I'm just saying that just like what's visible is almost never completely, it's not illustrative, if that's a word, of what it is. So anyway, so
Yeah.
one day, man walks into an animal shelter. This is not a fable. This is a true story. Man walks into an animal shelter and he has this old basset hound mix. And he goes up to the shelter worker and he says, "Hi, ma'am." And the man's like about 80 something. Says to the shelter worker, says, "Ma'am, I found this dog wandering around when I was on my daily walk, and he has no identification. And I thought I should bring him in because you could maybe do something with him." And the shelter worker was like, "Oh my God, sir, thank you so much. That's incredibly kind of you. Would you please fill out just your name and telephone number and where you found the dog, just in case we need to get in touch with you? We'll take him in the back to see if he's microchipped." He's probably not because he's well into his teens and they really didn't do that back then. So sure enough, man fills out information. Lady goes in the back, scans for a microchip and says, "Oh my God, he is microchipped."
Hmm.
And comes back to thank the man and says, "Oh, God," and grabs the information, the piece of paper, and then just happens to compare the information. It's the same. This is
Hmm.
his dog.
Wow.
So if I'm there, I'm losing my mind because I'm a
Hmm.
guy that takes care of dogs that have been thrown away, dogs that are old, dogs that nobody wants.
Hmm.
And like I would have gone nuts. I'd have rained hell on this old
Hmm.
man. But you know what? You know what the shelter worker, in the presence of something that made no sense, you know what she did? She asked one question. She looked at him and said, "Sir, what happened?"
Hmm.
And at that point, Brittany, the man burst into tears. And when he could finally collect himself, he said, "This is Joshua. I've had Joshua since he was 8 weeks old. He's 16. There's nothing more important to me in my life than my dog. But I'm dying. And I'm going in to a medical facility tomorrow. And I had begged and I pleaded and I offered to pay if they would please let me bring Joshua. And they said, no, no, no. And I thought if I brought him here and I told you the truth, that you would put him to sleep right away. And I know that Joshua still has time left.
Yeah.
And in that moment, because of the question that she asked, she looked at the man and said, sir, there's a sanctuary down the hill. And they take in old animals. Maybe they have room for one more. And the only reason that amazing Joshua got to live the last 18 months of his life at our sanctuary is because one person asked one question.
Mm.
That's it.
Removing all assumptions and judgment, because there's always, like you said, there's always a backstory.
Exactly.
There's probably several backstories, you know what I mean? And so that is amazing.
Now, let me tell you another story about an expression. So I do a lot of work with the Army, and it makes me so happy because my eldest brother, my dad, 42 years in uniform, enlisted, became a 2-star general. He's my guy.
Mm-hmm.
I love that man. I love that man. Every day, message on my phone. And then I talk to him every night.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working with a command, and it's led by the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Tross. And so I finish my brief. In the Army, it's called a brief. A talk is called a brief. Even though it's an hour, it's still a brief.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, David, would you please come to my office? I said, absolutely, sir. No problem at all. So I go to the office, and he said, David, your talk meant the world to me. And he said, David, it breaks my heart what happened to you at the hands of a Boy Scout leader, because I became an Eagle Scout. And my Eagle Scout, being an Eagle Scout, was one of the most fundamental and foundational things in my life. I never had a bad day in the Boy Scouts. And for you to have suffered, I don't. And then he took his hand and he pulled out his wallet. And he opened up his wallet and he pulled out, and he's facing away from him. He pulls out, it looks like a credit card. And then he shows it to me, and it's an Eagle Scout card. He says, David, this is an Eagle Scout card. You talk to any Eagle Scout, they're carrying this card. I got my card on November 3rd, 1998. He said, this card means, it symbolizes the achievement of what had been a dream for me. And then he gave me the card. And I took it, and I'm like, wow, sir, it's pretty amazing. And I went to give it back. And he said, no, you keep it. You've earned it. And so I now carry this extraordinary man's card because he wanted to do something to help heal that maybe unhealable pain.
Mm.
And I have told this story before, and I've had Eagle Scouts come up to me who've been in the audience of various talks and show me their cards and say, the fact that he gave you his card is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. he's I just texted him the other day, just saying, "Hey, sir, I was just thinking about you and I love you." And he says, "I love you too."
So that is part one of my interview with David. We had such an amazing time talking that I am absolutely going to split this up into 2 episodes in order for him to express in greater detail the treatment methods that have worked for him as he continues his journey from mental hellness to mental wellness. So please look forward to that. In the meantime, if you need additional help for mental health, mental distress, mental illness, suicidal ideation, or addiction, please feel free to look at the website at www.you'renotfinished.com to learn more about David and any upcoming workshops, any upcoming presentations he might be having. Make sure you visit his website at davidwoodsbartley.com. The information will be in the description. If you want to share your story as someone who is surviving, living with mental illness, a mood disorder, having experienced mental distress, or as someone who has overcome suicidal ideation, please feel free to reach out to me at brittany@you'renotfinished.com. Anonymous submissions, if you would like to submit on the website, are always welcome. Thank you so much again. I hope you guys have an amazing day and finish well. Bye.